Welcome back to Our Walk in Christ. So today on this Thanksgiving Day, I did not want to do a whole lot. That's why this video is not going to be edited much at all, if at all. I'm just going to drop it up there and just let you guys know, just kind of take some time off every now and again. That's why I didn't do a study this week. Just had so many other things going on. But what I want to talk about today is I just wanted to go into a verse that probably most of us have read, particularly if we've been around the Christian circles for a while, but I kind of gained some new insight of it this week as I was preparing a manuscript for a book that'll be coming out probably next year. And in that, I was taken to 2 Timothy 1:7. And the verse, and we've all heard this, most of us have anyway, "For God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but of power and of love and of discipline." And what I was struck at with the fascinatingness of that verse this time is that we all know God didn't give us a spirit of timidity, but of power or whatever else. And that's usually where it stops. But there's actually three things that Paul tells us that he gave us. Not timidity, but he gave us power, and he gave us love, and he gave us discipline. And I want to talk just briefly about each of those items. So, of course, the setting is Timothy is Paul's young disciple, and he is, I believe, if I remember correctly, I think Timothy was in charge of the church of Ephesus. Paul left him in Ephesus there to take charge of that church, and he was a very young man. And so, with that, if you're remotely successful but a young person, a lot of people will tend to look down on you over your age. And I've seen this a lot. Some people are like, well, you have to be old to have wisdom. No, you don't have to be old to have a lot of wisdom. And Paul was telling him, don't be worried about your age. Remember that you have been taught these scriptures way longer than most people have. And there's something in Timothy that Paul saw that said this man is the best leader for this situation. And so those are those things that we need to keep in mind. And he tells him, don't be timid in preaching the gospel. Don't have a spirit of timidity. That's not what God gave us. He gave us the spirit of power and of love and of discipline. So power. Let's talk about power. The spirit of power means that, remember that the power in the Christian life does not come from being wise or influential or having a lot of degrees. It comes from a God-given ability to just preach the word, to get over the hoop of trying to fill so much fascinating, scholarly, academic stuff into the gospel and just preach the gospel. And that's what Jesus told us, just preach the gospel. Paul says in 1 Corinthians that the gospel is a stumbling block to the Jews, and it was foolishness to the Gentiles. Okay, and so you had this power is in the power of the word and of the power of God, and that's what we need to keep in mind. Secondly, he talks about the power of love. God gave us the spirit of love. Of course, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. It's that very first element in the fruit of the Spirit. So that spirit of love is also carried forth in 2 Peter 1. So 2 Peter 1, starting in verse 5. Now for this reason, also applying all diligence in your faith, supply moral excellence, and in your moral excellence, knowledge, and in your knowledge, your self-control, and your self-control, perseverance, in your perseverance, godliness, and in your godliness, brotherly kindness, and in your brotherly kindness, finally Peter gets to love. And so we have this element in us that Paul is telling his young disciple Timothy, we don't have the spirit of timidity, but first we have the spirit of power through the gospel, through the words of Christ, through the foolishness of the cross, and the stumbling block of the cross. And then we have the spirit of love, the ability to love all people, even those people that society hates. That is why it's the bound and duty obligation of a true Christian to love the sinner irregardless of their sin. And so when you have people having aberrations trying to say, God hates this and God hates that, God only hates the sin. But the sinner is a redeemable person. And the sinner deserves every respect and every love a Christian can muster, whether or not they come to Christ or not. And unfortunately, our westernized or Americanized Christianity has become this view of, if you do good for me, I'll do good for you. It's a very American attitude. And in fact, it's one that Jesus himself spoke against. He says, if you're having a party, don't invite your friends and the rich. Those people can invite you back, and you'll receive your reward in full. And he says, invite in the poor, invite in the homeless, invite in the people who cannot possibly pay you back. That is the reward in heaven. And that is the model for Christianity in America. But Paul is saying that we have this love, and this love is without strings. It is without this requirement to accept the gospel. It is without this requirement to love back. We're just to love. Now, love doesn't always mean we put ourselves in harm's way, but it does mean that we're not harboring hatred towards people. And I knew this one church in this one town that I knew, if a homeless person would come in off the streets and needing money or needing food or something, the pastor would force them to pray the gospel, to pray the prayer of salvation, to give them anything. He was a loser. Guy was not a pastor. And then finally he says he gave us discipline. And that goes right back to that verse in Peter we just talked about. That discipline. What is that discipline? That discipline itself is the ability to, once we are saved, we have the ability to look at sin and go, I want to choose not to do that sin. It doesn't mean we reach perfection. We cannot reach perfect sanctification on this side of glorification. We can't do it. But what we can do is we can always be working to better ourselves. And that's why Peter has in that, add to your moral character, add to your diligence, add to. It's this study, this application. And that's why it's so important to get into the Word, not to legalistically check off how many times you've read the Scriptures, but it's to get into the Word so that you understand that you need to get in there, and you need to grab that discipline and add that discipline to your life. Because the Christian life isn't, yay, I prayed a little prayer of salvation, now I continue on the same path I was, keep on sinning, and I'm okay because that little prayer gave me fire insurance. That's not what the gospel. That's not the gospel. We are called to become more like Christ. More like Christ. More like Christ. And that takes discipline. So Paul tells Timothy, we do not have the spirit of timidity. We have the spirit of the power, the gospel, the love, to love all people regardless of whether they love us back, and the discipline to become more and more like Christ. So take those words with you as you partake in the Thanksgiving holiday and future on down the road as you may find this video. So thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy your daily walk with Christ.